6 years ago, I really fell back into mushrooms at a time when I was feeling extremely suicidal and depressed, and had kind of determined that it would probably be my last night on Earth. But I had these mushrooms.
What was it that led you to the point where you were that low in your life?
I felt suicidal at age 8 and depressed at age 8. And what really got shown to me was that the depression that I brought here with me in this lifetime wasn't of this lifetime. My path with the mushrooms, having saved my life and changed my life, really is what I have dedicated my life to. So I sort of feel like ayahuasca is queen of the cosmos, and the myceliums is the manager of this world. I got this vision of myself essentially like coming and fucking me, having sex with me to orgasm, and orgasming as myself in divinity.
And then it showed me a life where I was a woman and I experienced first person being raped by the side of a canal and then having my throat slit.
Oh shit.
Barrett Perlman is just an all-round amazing human, and we had such a wonderful conversation. It was really kind of deep, meaningful, and authentic, which is always my favorite type of conversation. We talked about how she experienced depression from as young as 8 years old, and 6 years ago when she felt like she was going to have her last day on Earth, how mushrooms ultimately saved her life, and then what her journey has been like with psychedelics, how she's integrated those to get to where she's at now, where she actually holds ceremonies with mushrooms. And someone that we have in common is Hamilton Souther. She's had him on her podcast and been out to Blue Morpho retreats to do ayahuasca there with him. And actually, coincidentally, we're both going to be there in Peru in June, so we'll get to connect in person. So really exciting. I really hope you enjoyed this podcast. Before we get started, I've got one thing to ask and one thing to offer. The thing to ask is if you could subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It will really help me out and it really helps grow the channel. So that would be amazing if you could do that. And the one thing to offer, every single Thursday, I'm now doing a free live group call on Zoom where we kind of dive into some of the topics that we talk about here on the podcast, but with the community, with the group. Each week we'll have a different kind of flavor, but it's talking about all of life's kind of deep, meaningful questions, topics, ancient wisdom, mysticism, spirituality, relationships, love, the nervous system, and all the juicy stuff. So if you like the sound of that and you'd like to join the call for free, there's no obligation to have to do it every week. You can just do it as and when it works for you, but the link is below. So if you want to get the Zoom link, just hit the link below, enter your name and email address, and you'll get that sent out. All right, that's it from me. Enjoy the podcast. See you on the inside. Barrett Perlman.
Sabri.
Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. After we talked on my podcast, it just so excited to now join you on yours.
Yeah, and you are the rose between many thorns because you're the first female we've had on the podcast, and it's not through a lack of trying. It's just this is the first one, so it's nice. It's nice to start to bring some balance.
Well, I received that with great honor and humility. I have a similar problem on my podcast, to the point where people were like, "Hey, there's a lot of great women out there. You should have more on." And I was like, it's not for lack of wanting to.
Yeah, I literally thought of doing a post on my Instagram earlier, just like a story, like, "Hey, I'd really like some awesome women to come and join me on the podcast. If you are one, or if you know any, like tag them."
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I've been tracking some good ones down though.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. My podcast episode that came out today is with a woman named Liana Giluli, who is the head of strategic initiatives at MAPS. And she also is one of the co-founders of the North Star guiding principles for how to ethically operate in the psychedelics business world.
Oh,
and
nice.
Yeah, she was very, very cool to interview, but like quite a MAPS process as well. Like I had to connect with their communications department and her assistant. And then the episode had to go through a review and make sure that everything was kosher with what they're allowed to say and not allowed to say, given the phase 3 FDA trials of MDMA. And it was
right. Wow.
process.
Very cool. So how was it?
Oh, it was lovely. She's a boss ass babe in the psychedelics world, and I had met her at the psychedelics business conference in November back in Las Vegas, and yeah, she's just a ball of energy and light, and her journey with cannabis and then psilocybin and discovering kind of for herself the same way I did the therapeutic benefits of it, and then just becoming obsessed with it, and also obsessed with the mistreatment of people for the use of plant medicines. And so that's kind of where her whole career path has lit up now. So
Yeah, so I guess our kind of point of contact was Hamilton Souther.
mm-hmm.
And, he's been on my podcast and obviously on yours, and you've been to Blue Morpho and done ceremony with him there.
Yeah.
When did you first start your journey with plant medicines?
I guess technically when I was 18, I took psilocybin for the first time. And before that, cannabis, but I don't think anyone 20 years ago was taking cannabis consciously, at least no one I knew. And even when we took psilocybin, it wasn't conscious, but I was experiencing things that first time that I can pinpoint now to the therapeutic benefits that we tie to it now, which was, I wanted to be alone. I was listening to music with my friends, and I kept kind of navigating to this back bedroom and like laying down and watching what I was seeing with my eyes closed, and just having my mind being blown that music was taking on colors and it was taking on shapes. And I was having the most phenomenal time, and they were so worried I was going to have a bad trip that they wouldn't leave me alone and they wouldn't let me stay in this back bedroom. So they kind of forced me, and I found hanging out with the six of them to be rather overwhelming, even because there was just so much stimulation, and we were watching The Wizard of Oz with the Dark Side of the Moon soundtrack. So it was just like classic mushrooms. And the images on the TV would kind of pop out and spin out in ways that took me a long time to take enough mushrooms again to see visuals like that. And now it's my favorite. So yeah. And then I would say maybe 6 years ago, I really fell back into mushrooms at a time when I was feeling extremely suicidal and depressed, and had kind of determined that it would probably be my last night on earth. But I had these mushrooms, and I wanted to take them and see if they changed anything. I hadn't taken them really in probably 10 years at that point. And I took them, and I went, my drug dealer at the time had said, everyone says, don't look yourself in the mirror, but I think it's the best thing you can do on the medicine for yourself. And so I took them, and I went into my bathroom with a candle and started looking at myself, and was trying to see auras at the time and not having much success. But I remember I was looking at myself, and I relaxed my eyes the way that you would to see one of those illusions pop out of the photos. You know how it doesn't really make sense, but then you relax your eyes and the 3D image pops out. And I did that. And all of a sudden I started looking at this eye right in the middle of my forehead, where like the two eyes kind of came together. And as I'm getting lost in it, images start shooting down this tunnel at me. And all of a sudden there's like, I'm very claircognizant, which means I get just sort of divine knowing. So I don't often hear voices or things, but I'll instantaneously know something that I didn't know before. And what started to come through was that I needed to love myself. And I was like, that's interesting. I don't know how to love myself. And this consciousness sort of went, okay, your dog's here in the room with you in the floor on his bed. Sit down with your dog. And so I sit down with Apollo, and I'm petting him, and it's going, fill with the love you feel for Apollo. Fill with it. Burst with it. Bigger, 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 until I'm practically crying. I feel so much love for my dog. And then out of nowhere, the consciousness slips like a mirror between me and my dog. And the love that was being projected onto him bounced back and hit me. And my whole body felt overcome with self-love for what was probably the very first time in my entire life. And it broke it broke that deep depression. It broke that suicidalness. And I just was so in love with being in love with myself that I was sobbing. And from that point forwards, I kind of knew that something was going on with these psilocybin mushrooms. And what like I left that and I was like, what the fuck was that? Like, let's do that again. Let's do that again. And then each month I would kind of go on a big psilocybin journey in my bedroom by myself and experience the wide array of messages and things that would happen in that space. And by all means, I could never recreate that night, and very quickly learned you can never recreate a journey, but also quickly learned that the nights when, I thought the mushrooms would bring me up and make me happy, and instead I would just be so sad all night, and I would be crying and releasing and reframing aspects of my life, specifically a lot of relationships or a lot of fucked up things I felt like I had done, and finding forgiveness in that space and honoring the reframes that came from being in that mushroom space that I wouldn't normally have thought of myself. And those reframes would stick and they began to change me. So even after a night of crying all night, really letting out those emotions, I would wake up the next day and feel so much better. And quickly identified that there was something to this that no one else that I knew seemed to understand. And I sat with it then for a long time, trying to tell people, and they were like, you're going to have a bad trip. And I was like, but I'm not. And it wasn't until about a couple of years ago that all of the research started coming out again about the benefits of psilocybin mushrooms. And I don't know why I had never done any research on it. And turned out everybody already knew. Not everybody, but scientists already knew. And yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it, when people say, like, you're going to have a bad trip, and you can see how it's reflective of life. But I think what people really mean is it's not going to be all rainbows and unicorns. And it's almost like you can see that's really just a reflection of how people try to move through life. And actually, that bad trip is the same thing that people try to avoid in life, which is some of the negative emotions and the processing and the things that we have to go through. And sometimes the trip is meant to be a bad trip where maybe all the shit is going to come up and you are going to bawl your eyes out. But that, like, to your point, the next morning you feel lighter. It's cathartic. You've actually processed and released things.
Exactly. I think that's a great way to look at it is, people just want to take something to feel good and feel better. And that's not how you do the work on yourself. Beginning to do the work on yourself isn't all rainbows and unicorns either. It's crying. It's looking at the parts of yourself that are icky and gross. The parts of yourself that, you may wish weren't there, but now now that you've identified them, you can integrate them into who you are and show them love and compassion because they are part of you. And even when they're bad parts or evil parts, there's ways of honoring them and the knowledge that they show you that you can transmute and use in a different way. That I think is really beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. What was it that kind of led you to the point where you were that low in your life in a state of depression where, you were seriously considering that being your last day in this lifetime?
I was suicidal for much of my life. I think I first wanted to kill myself at 8 years old, and I landed myself in therapy starting at 8 years old. At another point in college, I had a great therapist who suggested that perhaps I had a chemical imbalance and would be on medication for the rest of my life. And I thought that was the answer when I was like 22, 23. But even the medication, I could still find ways to find deep sadness in. And this particular time was after a breakup. And it wasn't that I broke up, but it was the things I had been led to believe about myself and being unlovable, and that made me feel so incredibly low. And so the first time I wanted to commit suicide, I didn't want to do my homework. So I don't know that for me, there's always been, it hasn't always been this great catastrophic thing. Like I think I would do much better with like, my whole house fell down and now I have to find somewhere else to live. Like, that's not cause for suicide, but like, you know, someone told me that I'm unlovable, and like, boom, it's time to go. And gives me a lot of compassion for people who struggle with suicide as well, because it doesn't always make sense to other people, and no one is living anyone else's life. And the things that make me feel incredibly low might not make someone else feel incredibly low. And just giving honor and space to everyone's feelings, no matter what they are, and also acknowledging that they can be transformed.
Yeah, so true. I think to that point of like, we don't know how other people feel, and what affects one doesn't affect another. And I had this conversation actually just earlier today, and it was more with my friend regarding relationships. And you know, he was kind of saying just what was kind of going on in the dynamic. And actually, if you zoom out, what it really was he was coming from the frame of, well, if I was you, I would do this, this, and this. And she was coming in the frame of, if I was you, I'd do this, that, and the other. And it's like, yes, but guess what? You aren't her and she isn't you. And you aren't meant, like, she's not meant to do what you do, and you're not meant to do what she would do, because you are you and you are unique and you aren't the same as her. And I think it's the same, you know, when some people will say things like, oh, if you're feeling like this, why don't you just do this, this, and this? Because that's what I would do. It's like, yeah, but they aren't you.
Yep, a million times over. And I see that a lot in how couples approach each other with like attachment styles, or with self-soothing. And I have a friend who recently showed me a program that he's developing about developing a check-in system with your partner. And for like, if someone's having a bad day, establishing 3 different levels for each of you about varying degrees of bad day. Like, is it, I'm just feeling kind of down and I'll be fine? Is it, you know, today's pretty bad. Do you have time and space to talk with me? To like level 3, teammate down, meltdown, bring in the chocolate, bring in the cookies, bring in, but whatever, and have a plan in place for whatever makes the other person feel good in that moment. It's really pretty cool. Like,
and I guess one of those levels for one person, if there's someone that likes to have downtime when they're feeling like that, it might be, I'm at level 2, and that means I need an hour to myself.
Yes. And that's a great point, because my partner just moved in with me, and it's early for us, but we're feeling very like each other's soulmates. And we both very much so value our alone time. And so we've started discussing that that's a scale we need to develop for us. 3 different levels of like, I'm fine with you in the other room, versus I need to go be by myself today, versus what do those levels look like, so that we can honor each other's need and desire for space.
It's so tricky, isn't it? Or it's not straightforward to have like especially a conscious relationship. I mean, but any relationship in general, because it can be really difficult not to come from the place of, here's what I would do, or here's what I would want, or here's how I would want to be loved. This was actually came up for me 5 years ago on ayahuasca, which was, it was to do with an ex, and it was, I was loving her the way that I wanted to be loved, but I wasn't thinking about how she wanted to be loved. And, you know, and you think about that, and it's not an obvious thing, because, you know, even if you think of like things like do to others as you want doing to yourself, that type of thing, you know. So if I was feeling like this, here's what I would want, so let me give that. But it's not, well, but what do they want? What do they need? How do they need to be loved? And I can say that that pattern has still played out for me in my most recent relationship at times, I think, where, you know, if something's wrong, I want to fix. I want to sort out the issue. And for me, if ever I withdraw, it's because something's really wrong. So if the other person's withdrawing, I interpret that as something's really wrong.
Me too.
um, and you know, especially if you have like someone who's like more anxious leaning with someone who's more avoidant leaning, then it is
Mm-hmm.
like the person that's more avoidant might just need that space, that downtime to kind of recenter. And then the more anxious person's like, hey, I come back, let me help, let me help, let me give you love, let me give you support, let me hold you, come here. They're
Yeah.
like, and then that makes it even worse. So they want even more distant. And you're like, no, no, come, I've got the answers, honestly.
I take it you're more anxious leaning like I am.
Yeah, it's like a puppy and a cat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um,
My partner and I in the beginning had a like our second week kind of had some moments like that where he had already told me like, oh, what's your attachment style? And I was like, I can be very secure, but I guess I lean anxious, you know? And he was like, okay, well, of course I tend to be avoidant. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, hopefully we're conscious enough that neither one of us do that. And then he was going through some things and very quickly was like taking space. And I, you know, was trying to give him space, but also like, oh, I just want to feel loved by him. I'll wait until he reaches out. And 2 days go by and I'm like pacing around the house, losing my shit. And finally said something. And he was like, oh my gosh, I love that you understand attachment styles. And he's like, call me on my shit. I don't want to make you feel that way. And he's like, yeah, I did need some more space, but I don't need space at the cost of your sanity. And
yeah,
that was,
it can be so hard to balance, especially because, you know, like what you said there was interesting. I think especially if we've been doing the work, we can become like very secure in almost all of our relationships and friendships and family dynamics. But I think
mm-hmm.
sometimes, I think it's the romantic relationship, it's our beloved, where we create, it's like an attachment style that is so deep, but also truthfully it's more conditional.
Mm,
You know, for like normally there isn't going to be something go on with a close friends where it's like, now we're going to break up and we're never going to see each other again.
right.
That's very rare. Or for that to happen with a family member, it has to be something like you know, pretty serious. Or like if,
Yeah.
you know, a parent or a child, you know, it's like it doesn't end in, well, that's it, okay, we're done, we're over.
Mm-hmm.
So, or it doesn't, like with my daughter, it doesn't matter, she's my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
She's not going to not be my daughter. Whereas I think, especially if you do have more of an anxious leaning attachment style, which I think a lot of people that are drawn to some of the deeper work and probably this podcast, normally it's born out of something. So I think people may be more anxious leaning or disorganized, you know, like fearful avoidance.
Mm. Yeah.
And you know, I think you can think. I was in this place. I was 5 years single, felt super secure. And then you
Mm.
meet that one person, and you go, "Oh fuck! I thought I had this figured out." And
Mm.
then you get that like that soul level attachment, where is both the most amazing thing you've ever felt and different to anything you've ever felt before, and also like the fear almost can go up to match it at certain times if you think you're going to lose it. And it's wild how the nervous system can react, because sometimes you can then find, I don't know if you find this, you're having a conversation where it's like your mind is saying, no, it's okay, they just need the space, that's not a problem, everything's okay. And your nervous system is telling a whole different story.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting to walk a conscious relationship and be conscious about it and navigate too, that you don't want to like go into it and feel like you're locking the other person. Like, okay, because we feel like we're soulmates, that must make us soulmates, and that means now we're committed for life. And I think we're navigating now that it's a conscious relationship. And so, yes, we feel that way, and we feel that way until it changes. And which I think we're both hoping and looking down the barrel of the future and going, can't see that changing for as far as I can see. But I also want it to feel good for him, and he wants it to feel good for me. Azria and Benjamin Becker did a fantastic job of describing this in their book called Becoming, which I read and now my partner's reading. And they really talk about quantum dating and showing up consciously and having the ability to use plant medicines and psychedelics to lean on to help with navigating their feelings in the relationship and honoring their true path. And it has shed light for us on making sure that we're honoring our path, and that is the first and foremost priority. And that in coming together, we come together as long as it still honors our path. And it looks incredibly aligned so far, but yeah, it's a different depth of surrender because, you know, even as we've talked about living together, it's like, okay, well, we're living together for the next 3 months, but also allowing for if something goes terribly astray in that 3 months, like that someone could opt out. And it's a deep surrender to the idea that everything's impermanent and everything is changing all the time. And even when you look at people who've gone and gotten married, like plenty of people also get divorced. So really they went into it saying, yes, this is it. But at a certain point they found that it wasn't together anymore. And I think we try to pretend so much like everything will be permanent just because we want it to be. But I'm personally really learning the curriculum of impermanence right now and how it applies to everything. Like I woke up with a terrible stomachache this morning and was like, do I cancel my day? Like I'm a woman of my word. I can't cancel my day. And I was like, well, you actually really could. Like if you felt bad enough, you could. So I took 2 ibuprofen. I feel fine now. But yeah, I was like, the whole day can be impermanent. And I was like, it's on my schedule. It can't be impermanent. It's permanent.
Well, thank you for being here.
Yeah, I'm stoked to be here.
That what you said then, the impermanence. It's, you know, I'll kind of, you know, be open with some of the stuff that I've been experiencing recently. You know, my beloved. We've really kind of not known where we've stood with each other since November. So It's been a while. We've not seen each other for a month, and we've maybe only seen each other like, you know, twice since January 1st, and we aren't together. And it's hard when you feel like you have had this soul connection where it doesn't matter if we're together or not. It's like it feels like we are, even if we don't speak. Like it's strange. And then, you know, if you've not experienced that, there can be this. I find if I slip into the thought process of just kind of separate self, human, just having my own individual experience, you can slip into the narrative of, surely this is meant to be my life partner that I'm meant to craft a life with. And it's not meant to just be a year-long thing. But I feel like some of the friction that comes up around that is that I think I know better than the divine and the great plan. And so I'm going, well, surely this means that. And no, maybe that level of connection was meant to have facilitated this growth, this emergence of you as your unique self, of her as her unique self, because that has all happened since we met. Crazy levels of evolution, awareness, emergence of our kind of unique self, so much processing, so many wonderful times, and a roller coaster. And maybe that was what it was meant to be. And I think when we hang on to the idea with a death grip that it's meant to be this thing because I watched all the movies and when you meet your soulmate, it's forever. And no, maybe it was the perfect thing that was beautifully crafted for this amount of time for you to become the person that you were struggling to be. And they just highlighted all the things that you'd been avoiding.
Absolutely. Last year, I had that person come into my life. His name was Nick. And as soon as we started hanging out, I was like, oh my God, this is my person. How could it not be? It made me reflect on all my relationships past and go, well, of course they didn't work out. They weren't Nick. Oh my God. And he was the first conscious person I ever dated, albeit one of our big hiccups was that he's sober. And I'm very much in plant medicines. And he came into my life right at the time when I really came out about this is it. This is my passion. I'm working with psychedelics now. I'm facilitating psychedelics and I am in that space healing and helping others heal. And became, it went from being maybe like 20% of my life to like now it's my full fuck yes. It's 60, 70% of what I do. But Nick came along and he gave me the space to fully sit in my authenticity. And when I would be melting down about, I didn't hear from you for 2 days and you must not like me, and him to be like, everything's okay. And he's like, even the fact that you're melting down about it right now is okay. And I was like, literally no one has ever said that to me before, that my meltdown is okay. And he would hold this beautiful space, and gosh, he helped heal my womb so much. The respect he had for my body sexually, I had never experienced before. He turned me on to my breathwork facilitation that I did. He was the first man who ever came into my life and just made everything better. And I was like, how could this not be my partner? And very quickly he was like, I'm not it. I'm not him. I desire something different. He also wants kids and I don't want kids. So another big thing. And, but then even as we decided not to date anymore, I cried and he held me and he really showed up in that divine masculine giving and made me see what it would be like to have just a divine partner. And I had never known a relationship could be like that. And so I reflect back on him. And even as we were going separate ways, the next day I wrote him this like 2-page long, grateful note of everything he did that I was grateful for. And I'd never broken up with someone in that way. I'd never written someone a gratitude letter afterwards. And I still see his place in my life as opening the doors to opening my eyes of what was possible. And I didn't know he was possible. And now that I did, I could never settle for anything less. And that was awesome.
Yeah, that's beautiful. But in the time though, at the time of it, coming to the end of that chapter, how did it feel?
Oh, it was, especially when he was like, I didn't think we were in a relationship, but the way we've been acting, let's admit we've fallen into a relationship and this isn't what I want. And that felt so rejected of how could you not want this, but also identifying like, for me, that's a huge thing of you want kids and I don't. And I'm not here to try to convince you otherwise. Like that's a very personal decision. And I don't normally date someone who wants kids. And when we had discussed it in the first couple of days of hanging out, I was like, I don't date someone who wants kids. And he's like, well, maybe you should examine what it's like if you do. And I was like, well, there's a definitive end date. And so I thought he was re-examining wanting kids by being with me. And he thought that I was allowing for the idea that there would be an end date. And that didn't feel great. And so, in the breakup, I just realized that I had nothing but respect for him, even though it wasn't what I wanted. I had so much respect for the doors that he opened in my life and connecting me to this community that I had only been in for a year. And he was very connected to the spiritual community here in this town. And that was so beautiful. And he and I have stayed good friends to the point where now, he's been in my living room crying about dating and the people that he's trying to see. And he's met my partner now. And just it's to watch them hug even was so beautiful because Nick opened the doorway for my partner to be possible. And I have so much respect for, in the zoom out of my story, the role that he played in me seeing, okay, now the partner's coming because I'm starting to really attract something better, something more beautiful.
Yeah, that's amazing. And maybe, like you said, that was his role. And it sounds like it was crafted perfectly. And that impermanence, to your point, it's exactly how it was meant to be. And I do think sometimes the narrative that we can grow up around about this idea of meeting your happily ever after. And I think sometimes I think almost it can become like a self-hypnosis where we tell ourselves repeatedly that this is what this is. And then when it's not that, it can really kind of crush not just what is, but what you thought was to be. And, you start thinking, like, you start imagining the future. You go to the highlight reel, don't you, where you imagine, like, skipping down the beach, holding hands and baking and, like, throwing flour in each other's face and laughing. It's all in slow motion.
Yes.
And then when that doesn't come into fruition, I think that can be the heartbreaking part, because it's almost like it's what never became that you thought would.
Yeah, there's almost like a foolishness that gets felt for me in that moment of, oh, I did it again. I thought someone was going to be the partner again. Like when I met my current partner and I was like, oh, he's my soulmate. People were like, cool. How many other times have you said that and thought that about someone? And I'm like, it doesn't fucking matter. Does it? Like,
none today.
Okay, so at least 2 times this last year, but why are we counting? But even one of them, I met someone else in the Amazon, my first trip there in October, on an ayahuasca retreat. And I was like, holy shit, who is this person? This person is a soulmate. But I also walked away going, there's something about this soulmate where I feel like we're not supposed to be together in this lifetime. And I love him so deeply. And the authenticity he allowed to even deepen in me by holding that just loving space for me, it was profound. And he really helped unlock me in the Amazon. And we're not meant to be together in this lifetime.
And maybe, just like as a different kind of possibility, not all soulmates are meant to be an intimate partner.
Yeah, exactly.
And I can identify, I have a soul family. And, then some of which are my brothers. They're how they show up in my life as my soul families. They're my like soul brothers. I feel it so deeply, and 2 specifically, I met at an event 7 years ago. Actually, it was the guest that I just had on, Peter Sage. It was at his event. I met those 2. And from that weekend, it's like we've been brothers since 7 years on. Like the connection was immediate. And it was like, it's like we'd been friends forever.
Yeah.
Soulmates. And I think sometimes I wonder when we meet someone of the opposite sex and we feel that, and because we're so used to, like, if we feel a connection with someone, it also comes with like intimacy and sexual union, that we kind of think like, is that meant to be this? Is it like, I know I've experienced that where I've met women where I'm like, I feel a really strong connection, but I'm not attracted to them. And it's almost confusing. I'm like, what does this mean?
Yeah.
It's almost like decoupling that. No, maybe we can have soulmates that are the opposite sex. They're meant to be part of our soul family, like a brother or a sister.
I think you make a great point, is like all that pre-programming of what have your relationships been like in the past. If you felt an attraction to someone, then it was romantic. But I think with soulmates, we feel this deep level of intimate connection that the only things we have to relate it to are family or romantic partner. And that's not enough for the spectrum. And I find that these soulmate friends, I feel so deeply connected to them, like you said, instantaneously, and a love that transcends all of the time I can imagine. And so we go family, because if you have brothers or sisters, you've known them since your inception, and that's what you have to relate to. But what if it's deeper? It goes beyond the knowledge of family. And so that's why they're your soul family. They're your soul tribe. Because that level of connection transcends all of the time that you can imagine, and that intimacy. And I think that's also where it gets confused in plant medicine ceremonies and psychedelic ceremonies, with newcomers who are receiving the medicine, projecting that onto their facilitator, because their heart gets opened in such a level of deepness, of understanding, of love for all things, that again, they go, I know romantic love, I know sibling love, and now you as my facilitator, I feel love, and I don't know what to do with it or how to sit with that. Comes up a lot, especially as a female facilitator, where they want to touch, they want to handhold, they want to maybe cuddle, but cuddle's not appropriate, and they don't understand why. They have this deep desire to love me, and they don't know what to do with it. And I often find myself either explaining in the moment or explaining afterwards, and then them going, oh, that makes a lot of sense the way that you're putting it. Like, yeah, because like, I don't want you to be my girlfriend, but I feel like I just want to connect in this deeper way. And
yeah. And maybe the cuddle in a different paradigm is appropriate, but maybe not under the one that the lens that they might be seeing the cuddle through means something different potentially.
Totally.
Whereas actually, through the lens of, if we're to remove all filters of what a cuddle means, actually that human to human embrace, and that heart to heart, and bless her, my daughter, she was only 6, and I've been away in Mexico for 10 days, and when I came back, I gave her a hug, and she went, wait, and she put her head to the other side, and she went heart to heart. So she was like on this side of me. I was like, oh, bless you. And yeah, but I think like it again, we don't really have a reference for that type of embrace and holding someone where it's platonic. Most people don't.
Yeah.
And when I was in Mexico, I was in Playa del Carmen, and it was the full moon, and there was just a meetup of kind of like, spiritual seekers on the beach, big fire, drums, and there's one lady that came over. She was like, "Hey, can I have a hug?" And we had a hug, but it was an embrace. It was an embrace, and I was like, "Oh, that was beautiful." And we didn't talk after. She was just saying hello, and it was just that. And there was maybe like a 5-second, just like, and that was it. And I was like, "That's so nice. It's so nice to share that with someone and actually feel almost like just a love that there was no conditions, there was no prerequisite. It was almost just like this loving embrace. And then that was it. We went on with the evening, and she hugged the person next to me in the same way. I was like, oh, beautiful.
And I think that's beautiful conditioning. So the more interactions you have with someone like that, where you can have a deeply intimate hug platonically, it makes you go, oh, okay, that situation was fine. Maybe the next one will be fine. Or if that's something that scares you, but you got exposure therapy to it, now when you do the next one, you might be a little less scared or uneasy about it. So now when I deeply hug people, I'm more surprised if they turn it into something weird, because I'm just like, oh no, we're going to hug. I'm going to take a deep breath. We're going to sigh. I'm going to make sure you relax. I'm going to relax. We're going to receive that oxytocin and use it in a different way. But
yeah, absolutely. Have you noticed, like, within men and culture, there's been this shift where at one time in the West, certainly, a man's greeting was like, it was this handshake. And then it kind of became the like, the bro handshake, and then it was like a bro handshake with like a half hug and a pat, and then like a half handshake and a cuddle. And now I've noticed that a lot of like guys that I know, it's just like we just see each other, we just have a hug straight away. And there's been
Nice.
like this evolution, but I see it more and more though, even with like people that I know that maybe aren't kind of on this type of path, just within kind of mainstream around where I am at. I just noticed that more, whereas a lot of guys will just kind of like have a hug. I'm like, well, this is interesting. That wasn't the case 5 years ago or 10 years ago. I can think back how there's just been this evolution from very formal to less formal to a bit more touchy-feely to come here, you, give me a cuddle.
I love that for humanity.
Yeah, it feels like a move in the right direction.
I love seeing men evolve and men heal. And, I think women have been given many more outlets throughout their life to express their sadness, to that it's okay to go and cry. And maybe we're given this out of having periods and major changes in our bodies, but that really only, I would say in the last couple of years, society is learning to embrace the idea that women have these major shifts that go on hormonally every month. I certainly didn't even embrace that about myself until maybe the last year, where I was just like, PMS is a joke, take something, get over it, be in control of yourself. And I witness how many women close to me that's not the case. They're really affected. And so, I think women have had more opportunities to lean into their feelings and express that. And I'm glad to see more men's groups coming about and more healthy expressions for men and their feelings. Even watching how athletic coaches are leaning more into allowing for that space within their teams, within their practices. I'm glad humanity could use some more compassion for one another.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's bringing balance, because so much of our society has been kind of dominated with masculine energy. And I've kind of made this point before, but I don't necessarily think it's kind of so much about toxic masculinity as it is about just completely unbalanced with masculinity. And anything, if it's only one thing and none of the other, it becomes problematic. If you only inhale and you don't exhale, we've got a problem. If your heart only expands and it doesn't contract, we've got a problem. If there's only night and no day, or if the tide only comes in and doesn't go out, like there's meant to be this balance all throughout nature. And I think the masculine, the feminine, it shows up everywhere, and I think we're meant to have it in us. But you can see just within society, even like largely, a lot of kind of feminism, a lot of it isn't really about the embrace of feminine as within the energetic kind of term of feminine. It's more about men, women. And you can see that often there's actually quite a masculine charge behind it. It's like, we'll defeat masculinity. It's like, well, to defeat is masculine in and of itself.
Yep.
So it's just more of the same. It's like, there's a fire. What should we put it out with? Petrol.
Yep. It's like that age-old, what do you call it? Fire on the stove, where it's like a fat. It's an oil fire, and you try to put it out with water. It's just going to make it more fire. Counterintuitive, but
yeah. So I think just realizing that how necessary feminine energy is, and that it's nothing to do with, like, it's not about male or female. Yeah, okay, sure. Potentially each gender will maybe naturally have, larger amounts of one than the other. But regardless of what the ratio is, there's meant to be balance within all of us. And I think for most people, women included, I think often there's a huge lack of feminine energy.
Hmm.
I think just within the school system, within everything, just kind of that masculine, like left brain dominant linear thinking, that's kind of so dominant within our society.
I think that's so many of the ways that we're taught to be successful is to plan, to have a schedule, to drive things forward. I mean, it's almost a bummer for me that to be successful in business, those core business concepts tend to be so masculine focused. I really struggled with my own femininity for probably my whole life. Like I loved sports. Eventually I became a pro wakeboarder, and I was running the Collegiate Wakeboard Association for all of America, governing wakeboarding on the national level and competing and traveling on the pro circuit and navigating my sponsorships and things. And my comment more often than not from boyfriends was like, they wished I would be a little more feminine sometimes. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, you want me to wear a dress? And they were kind of like, dress is a great start. Like, could you ever wear a dress? And I was like, I fucking hate dresses. And I didn't know how to step into that for so long. And what I was able to identify was that I didn't feel safe in my relationships. Like if I dropped the ball, that someone else would pick it up. And I think that's where the beauty of the dance between the masculine and the feminine comes in is what's put these women in their masculine so deeply. Are they single mothers? I could definitely see how that would drive a woman to sit very deeply in her masculine, because she's got to constantly be planning and taking care of a child and navigating a job and figuring out a lot of these lower tier security needs. And I think the feminine thrives more when it's unlocked and it's available to be in flow, to say, oh, I don't want to go to that appointment today. It doesn't feel good. Or I was going to go to the gym, but my stomach hurts, so I'm going to stay home. Or maybe it's, I want to go swim in the ocean, and yay, I get to do that. We often associate the feminine with this flowy idea of being able to just go and have fun, but there's so many other parts of that as well, like caretaking and the arts and plant medicine facilitation. Shamanism is actually a very feminine oriented, energetic. And for me, stepping into more of that feminine meant navigating how to be a boss on my own, and then how to have more compassion. And I think for me, it came about when I became a massage therapist, and now deeply listening to other people's bodies. And behind the scenes in the beginning, especially, I would have a lot of like very masculine thoughts, like, oh my God, this person's late. I don't have time for this. Like, do I want to go there? Do I want to do that? Is this money worth it? And then when I would see my clients, I would find myself dropping into this deep desire to listen to their bodies and to help and to show up and help impact change. And yeah, for me, I still struggle with the masculine and the feminine, and I have some women friends who are just so in their feminine that it blows my mind. Like one of my best friends in the entire world, she's late to everything because she's always in the moment and enjoying what she's doing and not wanting to leave. So she's late to the next thing. She sucks at scheduling. She doesn't want to put anything on her calendar that she might have to show up to that might not make her feel good. And maybe that's a little too far in the purely feminine direction.
That's it, isn't it? I think on either side of the masculine and feminine, if you go all the way to the far end of feminine, you've got chaos. If you're all the way to the far end of masculine, you've got tyranny.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this kind of like space outside of the extreme ends where, I think it's great to exist, but also if you can learn how to dip into each of the other, like if you're trying to come up with something creative for the business, it makes sense to get into a creative energy. And what does that look like? Do you need to go and do certain things that allow you to relax? Do you want to dance? Do you want to play an instrument? Do you want to go do some art? Is it, meditation, and then again, like put some music on, start dancing, let your body kind of flow a little bit and just start thinking more creatively, because we're accessing that. So I think it's almost knowing how to have, I mean, and maybe this is a masculine approach to accessing the feminine, but it's kind of, maybe it's having some tools, but it can be for the other side as well. You know, if someone's really far in the feminine, like, okay, I know that it's helpful if I can at times honor the clock. If I'm meeting someone at this time, so, you know, maybe there's some practice that can be implemented to, you know, to lean into that. And it's just a little bit of knowing yourself, isn't it? And it's okay. Like, it's okay that someone can be in the feminine, and, like, you know, if just kind of left to their own devices, we'll be 2 hours late. Like, it's not a problem for that person being who they are, but also we can just implement these little things where it's like, okay, I know I can do this and I'm fine with that, but maybe the person waiting for me isn't fine with it. And maybe I can practice, like, having a few little things that I can implement to help me be closer to the time that we agreed on.
Clearly you have struggled with these people as well. Growing up with my mom was like the biggest. She was just late for everything. How many times I was the last kid in elementary school waiting to be picked up. Or so how many times the principal called my mom and was like, she's like, I'm on my way. It's like, it's literally school got out 45 minutes ago. Like, how are you on your way?
Gosh.
But, you know, it was really nice. Today, for example, I wasn't feeling well, and I sort of crawled into a chair, and my boyfriend and I are doing this dance of the masculine and the feminine, and he's an artist, and he's a phenomenal artist, and he loves to do art, and he's trying to step more into his sort of business manager role and more of the masculine. And I love our dance with it because, you know, I think in many lifetimes past, I've been a man, and I tend to default to these masculine characteristics, but today I wasn't feeling well. And so he just sort of like really took care of me, which I identified too as also a masculine quality. And men enjoy being needed and fulfilling that need and being of service. And, you know, so he was bringing me ibuprofen and making me coffee and like, what else do you need? And it allowed me to drop into like my own feelings and how I really felt, and to really check into my body. And I was like, wow, normally I would have to make my own heating pad. I would have to find my own ibuprofen. I would have to do all these things. And here was this divine human taking care of me. And it made me soften so much. And that was really, really beautiful. So it's always a dance, right? The masculine and the feminine, and the polarity and the fluidity between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned about mushrooms, and that was kind of like maybe the beginning of, like, you know, plant medicines and the way that we used, whether you knew it or not, therapeutically. At what point did you integrate ayahuasca into your life? When did that come about?
Ayahuasca came about probably maybe 2 years after I started doing psilocybin regularly. I found this, I call it the Los Angeles knockoff version.
And was that 4 years ago?
Yeah, I guess yeah. And so I had heard all of these great things about ayahuasca and the epiphanies that you have on them, and it's beautiful healing medicine. And I found an event on Eventbrite that someone was holding an ayahuasca ceremony in Los Angeles, and you could just opt in. And but the guy was kind of pretty upfront, and that he wasn't a shaman, and he had the recipe for the brew. And while he'd helped facilitate a lot of ceremonies, he himself wasn't a shaman. And I was like, that's fine. I'm far enough along on my own spiritual journey. I'll be okay. And I went, and it was like in a dance studio on a busy street in Los Angeles. And the guy held terrible space, just absolutely terrible space. And I drank the medicine. And after the first cup, I didn't think it was working at all. And I almost didn't take the second cup. And then I took the second cup, and I got to have the big epiphany on ayahuasca that I had been searching for. And it was really eye-opening for me because, as I mentioned, I started, I felt suicidal at age 8 and depressed at age 8. And what really got shown to me was that the depression that I brought here with me in this lifetime wasn't of this lifetime. And it was almost a deeper soul sadness at coming back to do another life. I know we opt in on this, but I think something really under discussed is that even though we've opted on coming back in, something can go astray when we get here. That, it's not all rainbows and roses and happiness and unicorns, like we keep saying. There's sadness that happens, and inexplicably so. And I even reflect back now on what was I eating then, and what could that have contributed to my depths of my pain and my mood swings. Like, now that I've cut bread out, I'm really stabilized in my energy, and I'm really stabilized in how I feel every day. And what could life have felt like had I eaten fantastic foods my whole life? And was that maybe part of the cause? But I digress. And so that first ayahuasca journey really gave me a chance to sit with my soul self and go, well, we're here, and can we do this better? Can we do this better together? Can we, cooperate as a team? And I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed out the sadness. And for me, that was a really, really powerful tool, that first experience. And so after that, it took me maybe another 2 years before I returned to ayahuasca. And I went with a proper shaman this time, still in Los Angeles, like a loft somewhere, but in a very beautifully curated space, very thoughtful space, and had just a completely different journey, and one that was very, kind of felt like there was always this clear consciousness that would come in and weave through these soft lessons. And now that I've had much more experience with ayahuasca, every time is so different. It's oftentimes there's not soft lessons, there's hard lessons. And she's just this beautiful majesty that is kind of queen of the cosmos. And I identify too where she plays really well with the mycelium, with mushrooms. They're like, when psilocybin gets, it evolves into psilocin in your stomach as it breaks down, and psilocin and DMT are just like one teeny tiny molecule different from each other. And so I sort of feel like ayahuasca is queen of the cosmos, and the mycelium is the manager of this world, this phenomenal reality that we spend most of our time in. And so, yeah, they play really well together. And
that's really cool. I've never heard it explained like that. I like that a lot. Do you find that you have a better relationship with any of the psychedelics, or is it just different rather than better and worse?
Yeah, I hate to say better or worse. It's so polar. But yeah. I have really been called to the mushrooms. I think my path with the mushrooms, having saved my life and changed my life, really is what I have dedicated my life to. And even on an ayahuasca journey in October, the mycelium and the mushrooms came to me and had this big conversation with me about needing to share them with the world and facilitate that and help the world heal through plant medicines, and to trust and surrender on that path. So I feel very connected to the mushrooms. And ironically, well, there's no such thing as irony, but synchronistically, my whole life, mushrooms have been my favorite food. And I love them in all shapes and forms. Please put them on everything. Smother my food in them. I am a sick fuck for mushrooms. And it just like crosses over and transcends into now this beautiful love for the medicine. But ayahuasca is really growing on me. And I really see the importance of her power. And I feel the ayahuasca in me at all times now. And I think that's something that once there's like life before having done ayahuasca, and there's life after. And in the life after, she's always in you. That's a very beautiful connection. And I feel that with the mycelium as well. Like, there's just way too many synchronicities to not have been happening because I'm connected to that mushroom mycelium.
Amazing. How do they, because I've only done mushrooms once or twice. and
Mm.
ayahuasca, definitely more. Um, what's the difference? What's the difference in the experience? Because like you said, they're closely related, but they are different. What would you say from your experience the difference is in how they kind of interact with your body, with your psyche, with your soul?
I think the biggest thing to note is physically, they are gentler. While they're a beautiful healing fungi, they do get in and kick out bad stuff. Like when I had COVID, about 2 weeks after I had COVID, I did a mushroom journey, and I spent the last 45 minutes of the journey purging up what was in my lungs, what was left over from COVID. Like the mushrooms got in there and kicked all that gunk out. And for
Mm.
45 minutes, I was just hacking it up, hacking it up, hacking it up. And I see that happen a lot with different physical modalities. So I think, yes, mushrooms are generally gentler. You're less apt to vomit, purge. There's still some nausea associated with it, but they're beautiful healers of the body. I think they're a little gentler on the psyche as well. But everything's different. In larger doses, I find mushrooms to be much more like ayahuasca. But so few people rarely get to those larger doses to have that profound experience.
What kind of dose would you have to get to that?
I would like to say, for starters, it's a little strain specific. So for the last several months, I've been studying a strain called penis envy, which for mushrooms, which is a very common strain to find. And I find it to be really DMT heavy. It's also really strong. So if you take 3 grams of penis envy compared to 3 grams of golden teacher mushrooms, you're going to have a much bigger experience. So you'd have an experience more akin to 4 grams of golden teachers.
Mm.
For me, I like to work on 3 grams of penis envy. I've taken up to 5 grams of penis envy, I think. I find at 4 grams, it really starts to mimic ayahuasca. And that's a really fun and delightful space for me because I have a lot of fun in those spaces. Learning the lessons and meeting the spirit guides who are there. And sometimes aliens come, and getting also healing information from my body and ways to understand other people's bodies better. So yeah, I think mushrooms are in general gentler and still provide that beautiful throughway. And they're more accessible and easier to, I think you're less likely to battle spirits or negative actual entities or anything in the mushroom space than may come up in ayahuasca.
Yeah, yeah. I've had some wild ones in ayahuasca.
Yeah. Can you share
Yeah,
with me some?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I know in the first 1, 2, 3, yeah, certainly the demons came up in all of them. The first one, demonic entities. I was like, my eyes are closed. Like, I'll open my eyes and they'll be gone. Oh no, still there. and and then I was like, okay, I guess I've got to fight these things. I was in a battle arena, and I've told this story before, but there's like a battleground, and then I looked closer. It was almost like I tilted my head and like looked closer, and I realized actually what I could see was this what appeared to be demonic. It was their pain. That was just a physical representation of the pain they were holding inside, and that the thing they needed, the ultimate currency that they needed that would neutralize the pain, was love.
Mm.
And then this was my first journey, and about an hour into it, and I just kind of knew intuitively. And this is what's interesting. I've got my experience with all my ayahuascas. It's like and Hamilton kind of suggested this. It's like some of the things I was doing intuitively is what they teach.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, I've just kind of intuitively known how to navigate what's coming up, where the demons that I was about to fight, look closer. Oh no, this is pain. They need love. And then the narrative was that, that happens so much in life where when we see like ugliness that might look like kind of in the ayahuasca, it's like I'll then look around and see like the facilitator, and she looked like weathered. And it's like, oh, I'm seeing her pain. I'm seeing the stuff that she's been through right now. It's like I could see it in people. But of course, we can't see it on people. So when they behave in a way where the behavior might seem ugly, we can judge it, but we don't realize, no, that's their pain.
Yeah.
That's their pain that's coming up. And what does their pain need? It needs love. So that was there. The second one, again, the demons came. And on this one, it was just like, just straight away, there was no resistance. I just went, hey, like, hey, come here. Give me a hug. They were just like, do. And then away they went. The third one, that one didn't go quite as smoothly. I've been going through a tough time, a really tough time actually. I was going through the separation with my daughter's mom, and it was painful and it was difficult. It was fresh. My daughter had just turned 1, and there was stuff going on that was difficult. And I'd said when I got there, I said, I think it might drag me across the coals and take me to hell. But if that's what I need to do to get over this, like I'm in. And and I said to the person running the ceremony, I said, I feel like I need a big dose. And she said, actually, I drank yesterday and it told me how much to give you. I was like, okay. Which was really interesting because, get this, she mostly kind of serves around kind of like 20 to 30 mil for most people. And she gave me 80. So I don't know what it is in ounces, but just in milliliters. And it didn't do anything.
Interesting.
It didn't do anything. And then she was really surprised it didn't do anything. And then she told me after that the night before it had told her to give me 100 and I'm not sure, it was like, I can't remember now, maybe like 140, let's say. And she went to do it and then she thought, I can't give him that much. I can't. So she gave me 80, which was like almost 4 times what some of the other people had. And it didn't do anything. So how wild is that? Is that like what was still a big dose didn't do anything. So what it had said the night before was needed. So I had to have like a huge drink. Anyway, the demon came again, it was like, and I said, I didn't offer it love. I didn't say, hey, welcome to the party. Come give me a hug. I just went, all right, motherfucker. I can handle anything you've got. Give me a worse. And it just went, like it was just like chuckle and like, aren't you cute? And then it got, it was bad. So like, it's like, that was a narrative. It went, and then it showed me my daughter and I said, oh, fuck off. I meant to me. And then it showed me her being like molested and her being like strapped to this machine where there's like a crank mechanism that was pulling her arms. I was like, it was awful. It was so bad. And the music at the time was like heavy. And I was just about to, like, I was just kind of came around enough to shout, change the, like stop the fucking music. Because it was like, it was unbearable. And then it actually did all pause. And then like it went in rewind and she was fine. She was fine. And then like, it was almost like, we'll come back to that later. And then it went on to some other things. And it did get back to that later. And that was wild. That was wild. And actually in that one, it took me into past lives. In the most vivid detail.
Wow.
And what was really interesting is before that began, this is funny. So I'm laying there on my back. I put my hand on my chest and I'm like, I mean, I'm a bit chesty anyway, but I was like, I'm a woman. Like, interested. So like, I take my hand down south and I'm like, I'm a woman. Like, I put my fingers inside myself. This is interesting. And then me, as an actual me, then is in front of me and proceeds to fuck me. So,
Cool.
so I'm now a woman with actual me over the top of me having sex with me.
I've had something similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. One time in the plant medicine space, I really, because so many of my past lives were as men, I got this vision of myself essentially like coming and fucking me. And it was so fascinating to have me inside of me doing this beautiful, perfect harmony of the masculine and feminine. Couldn't be any more perfect because it was my energy as the masculine and my energy as the feminine, having sex with me to orgasm and orgasming as myself in divine divinity. Wild.
Well, it's so interesting you say that, because then after that, it then took me into the past lives where most of them were as women.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it took me to being a queen in Egypt.
Mm.
And it was like so vivid. And then I can't remember now. It showed me a whole load, but the two that stood out was the queen in Egypt. And then it showed me a life where I was, again, a woman, a prostitute in the UK, maybe 200 years ago. And I experienced first person being raped by the side of a canal and then having my throat slit.
Oh shit.
And that was happening whilst I was purging. So I'm purging, and in the journey, I'm like having my throat slit, and then I'm laying there with this bucket, like. Anyone right now who's watching this who was thinking about doing ayahuasca is seriously reconsidering. But it showed me that I'd experienced these lives as women where I'd been worshipped and revered as a queen, and I'd also been the absolute opposite. You know, I'd been a prostitute that was treated like I had no worth at all. And I'd experienced this full spectrum, and then how that translates to this life. And it was super interesting.
Well, it makes me so excited to do ayahuasca with you this summer.
Yeah, how amazing is that? So for anyone that doesn't know, just by chance, and for anyone who's listening and not watching, that was in quotation marks. Yeah, we're both going to be at Blue Morpho in June, end of June.
Yeah. Are you going to do the 2 weeks?
No, just the one. It's difficult for me because I have my daughter, and I have her, like every week, and it's difficult to arrange longer periods of time away. So
sure. So look forward to meeting you and having these experiences in person and seeing what the downloads are. I was looking at going back. My original plan was to go back in April as well, and I've had some financial things shift and change, and I'm launching a few new aspects of my business that I probably will not go back until June. So
yeah, that's actually why I chose June, because I wanted to kind of give myself time to get, I wanted to get into a really good rhythm with the podcast and all of that as well. But I'm really interested in, I know Hamilton's launching the Academy.
Yes.
And I've felt called for a long time to hold ceremonies, but I never wanted to, because I didn't want to just be the guy that just says like, hey, I'm just holding a ceremony. I kind of want to go through some type of initiation or training. So I feel really called to that.
Yeah, the Blue Morpho Academy is a really fantastic program where he's offering certifications for different levels, from trip sitter to master facilitator, which is something like a 4-year possible training. And a lot of the learning can be done online through pre-recorded materials, and then also group sessions. But then a lot of it will also be done in person. So you'll need to come to the retreats to experience and help facilitate. And he's just the most incredible shaman I've ever met. The depth of his knowledge, the amount of times he's sat, the places he's gone. I've never shown up in ceremony and had anyone else be able to teach me how to navigate usually people are like, just surrender and go where it takes you. But, he was able to look in me and identify that I needed to navigate. I needed to be able to go places and do things. And as a shamanic healer and facilitator myself, to be able to go different places at will, it's an important tool set. So I'm also really looking forward to his program. It just launched this week.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
So I thought it was launching in April. Okay, March. Nice.
Is it not April yet? I think.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the group coaching program the coaching program that launched this week. That he's also doing like one-on-one mentorship and group mentorship.
Amazing. A couple, I guess, last things that I wanted to ask is, when you are holding ceremonies for people, what does that look like with mushrooms?
So I'm starting to hold larger group ceremonies, and by large, they're still, pretty small. But my last ceremony was for 3 people, and it's actually set up a lot like ayahuasca, where everyone's got their own mats, and we lead into it with intention and meditation, and everyone's encouraged to go into their own space, and then at times we come out and we have group space together. But as a facilitator, I'm also sitting there aligned in my own light body, holding space for each one of them, feeling into what they're experiencing, sending them energy that could help, and supporting them with questions, and they're answering their questions in that space. My last ceremony, one of the girls was so cute. She said she kept looking to my face because she was concerned that things weren't how they were supposed to be, but she kept seeing a smile on my face, and she just went, okay, everything's okay. I've had much smaller ceremonies. Like, I really enjoy one-on-one ceremonies because it gives us a chance to really talk through the therapeutic aspects of what's going on. Mm-hmm. And I enjoy doing singing bowls also during ceremony, and sending that. I'm able to really direct the energy of the sound into the person as that happens. But yeah, the bigger ceremonies are similar to ayahuasca.
Beautiful. And what have you got coming out next week? Tell me about that.
So I am launching the Sacred Integration Tribe, which is a community of heart-centered individuals to come together and integrate their plant medicine and psychedelic experiences. So that looks like weekly live integration calls with me. Each month, I'll also be bringing in a guest host to one of the integration calls, and also to help with the integration resources. So we'll build a resource each month together that helps people integrate. And so it's a wonderful space to come to with your recent experiences, with those maybe that were a long time ago that you're still working on integrating, and even just to find community with like-minded individuals and people who've had similar experiences. I think that that's something that when you get into this space, it's so easy to return home and then find that, your family doesn't understand what you're talking about. Your friends don't understand what you're talking about. And in this way, we can all come together and share and support each other, and do so in a heart open space.
That sounds amazing. Incredible. Yeah, I'd love to, I'd love to check it out.
I look forward to having you join.
Yeah. Amazing. So good. Well, thank you so much for being here. The time's gone so quickly.
I know.
I checked. I was like, how's that happened? But yeah, thanks so much. For anyone that wants to find you, Barrett, what's the best place for them to go to?
You can find everything on my website at barrettperlman.com. I'm sure you'll probably have that linked up in the show notes because my name is so easily misspelled. But if you'd like to join the Sacred Integration Tribe, you can go to sacredintegrationtribe.com. And right now we have options to join the waitlist for it, or when it goes live, we'll be able to sign up right there. And I'm also, Instagram's my main place I hang out. So at Barrett Perlman.
I'll link everything, like you say, in the notes and description.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to join you, and I love your presence and how deeply dropped in you are, and you're such a joy to hang out with.
Oh, thank you. The pleasure is mine.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barrett. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that podcast with Barrett. Now, if you want to find her, the links are going to be below for her Instagram and her website. And if you're interested in trying out her new program around integrating your experiences of psychedelics, which sounds incredible, and I'd love to join that myself, the link is going to be below for that as well. If you haven't yet subscribed, please do that because it really helps the channel, and maybe even like the video if you got some value out of it. And that's it from me. Thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you on the next one.